2,000 years ago, the Romans considered mustard to be an essential part of their diet because they believed it was an aphrodisiac. In fact, the name is derived from two words used at the time: mustus, a wine mixed with the seed, and ardens, meaning fiery. Today, most people find mustard in a jar on the shelves of supermarkets. But why don't you try growing your own?
One of the easiest and one of the most prolific annuals to grow is mustard. In fact, you could grow it 6 and 7 times through the hot summer months. It is easily sown right where it is to flower, so you merely prepare a bed of soil that has a little bit of compost dug into it and moisten it well. Then you sprinkle these easy seeds just at random over the surface. Rake them in and keep them moist. Within 3 days, the first little seedlings come up, and at that point, you can actually pull them up and eat them. They are delicious. You can actually even grow them on cotton wool. They're one of the plants that is excellent for the circulation, so they can be taken in all forms. I like to grow them in a bed in full sun so that I can pick the beautiful little leaves and yellow flowers for salads and stir fries and soups, and as we have done it here, in a cheese and onion and egg flan. Mustard, fresh mustard leaves and a little bit of mustard powder, my own crushed seeds naturally, is absolutely delicious. Mustard grows with tremendous speed. It doesn't take long, in fact I would say about 6 weeks, before you have the full flowers and the charming leaves. Then it sets seed. Now this is the exciting part. What we do is when it is fully ripe, as this is, notice the tiny little seed pods that are bursting with the little yellow seeds. We then take these whole trees, pull them out, the whole little mustard bush is pulled out and tied together with wire and hung up to dry. As soon as it is dry, you can then break off the seed pods like this and push them through a really excellent sieve. This one is really a colander, but it works so beautifully. You crush them like this and of course sprinkle the seeds out, discarding all the papery husks. Now those seeds can be turned into vinegars with the fresh leaves and flowers as well, because this is now the follow-up crop. You can do this right through the summer, or you can make it into your own most delicious mustards, or put it into a pepper grinder and grind it over your food as you would pepper. Why is mustard such an important crop? And this is the reason. It is a warming herb. So particularly lovely through the winter months, mustard should find itself on every dining room table. You could use the prepared mustard, but far nicer and far more filled with exciting flavour is your own mustard. I use the chopped leaves in the stir fries and I sprinkle them into salads, but at the same time I spread over, say, fish or roast chicken. I spread a thin layer of mustard. And my own mustard, made with honey, is absolutely delicious as an accompaniment to cold meats, or to, again, stir fries, or our usual South African braais. Absolutely delicious, spread over the meat before, or the sausage before baking it or grilling it. Why do we use so much mustard? It's a stimulant. So it stimulates the digestive juices and it helps move it through the sluggish body. This means it's good for circulation. It's good for heart ailments. It's good for cold hands and feet. Good for warding off chills. It has components and mineral salts that are astonishing. And in fact, more and more people are discovering, and more scientists are beginning to discover the amazing attributes that this very usual plant has. But it's the growing of it that is the excitement. So find a place somewhere quickly for mustard.
A story behind every name, and I would be totally fascinated to know why the English call this plant tansy. What was it that got them to that naming? The Latin botanist, the botanist who named it in Latin, called it Tanacetum vulgare. Now the one name I do know is vulgare means common, so it was the common tansy, and that's what I'm holding in my hand. It has certain medicinal uses and herbal uses, and it has got quite an attractive head of flowers. But the plant in front of me is really the subject of our discussion. And this is a related cousin. It's called Tanacetum vulgare crispum. And there you can see how the leaflets are crisped up, they're all curled up and they're finer. And the books tell me that it flowers only very infrequently. And so it's almost a non-flowering form with these doubled leaves. So it's, instead of having a double flower, it seems to have a double leaf. Now, one of the disadvantages of it, growing it in South Africa, is that our climate is so amenable to it that it grows very quickly and it gets long, rangy stems, and the plant tends to collapse in the middle and open outwards. So this batch now is about due for being hacked right back, literally to a couple of centimeters from the ground, covered in manure or compost, and let it come again. And it really is nice when the young growth comes out and you get that effect sort of close to the ground level. Tanacetum vulgare crispum.
A gardener needs many attributes, amongst them a love of nature, a willingness to learn, an artistic eye, and of course, endless hope and patience. But perhaps the most necessary of all is enthusiasm. A group of students from a school of garden design in Johannesburg have certainly got this in abundance, as we saw at a show that they designed and constructed themselves. A variety of different theme gardens were depicted: formal, informal, romantic, geometric, as well as one to delight our young gardeners. This charming design combines relaxed, colourful plantings with an element of fun. Ideal for a townhouse is the Good Life Garden, which incorporates water, paving, lawn and informal planting on a small scale. Moorish influence is seen in the Garden of Contemplation, which was designed to create a sense of peace and tranquility. Red, grey and black were the only colours allowed for the trendsetter's garden. A strong geometric design focuses the landscape on form and definition, whilst the planting is kept simple and bold. A tucked-away secret garden has an appeal that's irresistible. It's a spot for peace and tranquility, created here by soft foliage, gentle colouring and, of course, water. Since the 17th century, the potager, or garden for the pot, has been an integral part of life for every household. Today, more and more of us are becoming aware of the delicious benefits of homegrown herbs and vegetables. The Waterwise garden offered a number of useful water-saving tips and included this unusual water feature. The geometric element of the traditional formal style was used to create a thoroughly modern garden. Architectural plants with sheets of ground cover form the basic plant design, together with blocks of vivid colour. Many of us think that a garden is incomplete without roses, so a pretty Victorian rose border was designed for our enjoyment, whilst the Victorian pleasure garden invites us to relax in a comfortable summer house with the soothing sound of water. Smell is one of our most important senses, and fragrance adds the final touch to a perfect garden. Scented herbs are brought together here, planted round a strong design of grey flagstones enclosing an attractive rectangular pool. Water plays a vital part in garden design. This enchanted garden just wouldn't be the same without its pond and surrounding trees. Small gardens can be a challenge, especially when the area is long and narrow. This design won top honours at the show. Any garden can be made attractive to wildlife, and we're appreciating more and more the importance of birds, insects and small animals in our suburban gardens. Food and water must be provided, as well as a secluded spot for nesting. A natural cottage garden is an ideal haven for nature's creatures. Informality is the key to this planting, with a pathway leading up to a truly rustic bench. One of the greatest challenges for any gardener is to create a distinctive style. The layout, choice of plants, architecture, and many more factors affect the look of a garden. Choosing the right combinations is critically important, particularly on a small property where every part of it can be seen in detail. Derek Wilton seems to have managed quite nicely.
How fortunate we are as gardeners that we're given a free choice of the style to choose to create a garden with. And Derek, I see here you've chosen a really unique style. What made you do it, and how long ago was that?
Yes, Doug, we've been here for 23 years, and we sought just to develop a style which we liked. It may have a type of classical feature, but I've always liked a classic or a clean style.
Yes.
And so we took the oldest house in the suburb and slowly evolved and developed the old place until it is the transformed house that it is today.
Right, yeah. And as you were saying to me earlier, one could feel like in the south of France, you could be in Greece, you could perhaps be even in Argentina. It just seems to be able to be so transient, which I think is so clever of you.
Well, the garden has many moods. I think the architecture is interesting. And what we tried to do was to make the garden fit the architecture, or make a blend between the building and the garden. So that is what we've tried to do.
That's almost an essential ingredient in building a garden. It's crazy to not match your garden in some way to the architecture of your home. And in fact, we've gone even a step further, that your interior and your exterior now should have some kind of a blending as well.
Yes, I fully agree.
Yeah.
I fully agree.
Now, you've used quite a lot of statuary, and I think you've used it with great taste, but each one has a story about it, I understand.
Yes, that's right. I'll be happy to share a secret with you, a little story. When we got cracking and unfolding the garden, I took a statue, and each statue epitomized a child.
Right.
So the two lads behind you are Anthony and Nicholas, and Jenny is very
Around
beautifully
the corner.
up on the
Yes,
wall,
yes,
spouting beautifully.
Yes.
And then for our last born, our last two children, we have
Were they
Jonathan
twins?
and Christine.
Were they twins?
No, they're
No, right.
pigeon pair.
Pigeon pair.
Christine, who was then only about 8 years old, was very abashed to hear that these nude things would be displayed. So she said to me, "Daddy, all right, but can Johnny please face the road?" So we compromised on that.
In a most intelligent way, you've taken this small part of your garden, which I believe could have got lost or become a compost heap or something, and turned it into an enchanting courtyard. You must have had a really good eye to see all these things.
Well, thank you, Doug. It was something which didn't happen overnight, and we've been happy to take it, bit by bit, piece by piece. But the whole theme of the garden has been harmony of the garden and building, and to try and put them all in together. And also, as you can see, we're crazy about outdoor living.
Yes.
So,
Yes. And how well you've linked each area to the next one, and how there's always something to draw you out of this courtyard to the next one. I think that is so great, really.
yes, I found that a very fascinating thing, and that's the one part of my garden that pleases me, is that I have that feeling that we have linked all the parts, the buildings with the garden, and each piece leads on to the next piece.
Tell me, to get your inspiration, did you always feel of the garden as a cohesive whole, or did you sort of plan each section as you went?
Well, it started many years ago, sitting under the syringa tree, and then the swimming pool came, and I laid it out in a meaningful way, and from that the garden developed piece by piece. But the final impetus to the garden development came when I built the pavilion, because that then finally set the stamp on what kind of style the garden would finally unfold into with the architecture combined.
So the
And that's how
finishing
it took.
touch to the garden really came from this addition of the pavilion.
That's right. Yeah.
Orchids occur naturally in many parts of the world, with about 400 species indigenous to South Africa. Although many are hardly recognizable as orchids to anyone except an expert, there's growing interest in the garden cultivation of some of them. Researchers at Kirstenbosch are constantly searching for ways to make these plants available to the public. One of the most spectacular is the dicer.
Dicer uniflora, which is the one that we have here, is one of the most striking and also the largest of the dicer species. A form does occur here on Table Mountain, and it usually occurs in sort of moist, south-facing, cool seep areas. I have here a few color forms. You can see they're actually quite variable. Sort of a more orangey one, a pinky one, and most striking of all is the yellow form. This has only come into cultivation very recently. Usually you find yellow forms occurring on very, very rare occasions. Fortunately, several years ago, a yellow form was found by Kirstenbosch staff on the Table Mountain range, and a year later, another yellow form was found on the Worcester Mountain ranges. And the two were brought into cultivation and hand cross-pollinated. Now, you might wonder what is so special about the fact that we had to hand pollinate them. Dicer uniflora is pollinated by a butterfly, which is called Erepetes tilbachia. This is a dead one that I found, hence rather tatty. And this butterfly is only attracted to the red colors in the spectrum. The yellow form would never ever be pollinated by the butterfly because it just doesn't see the yellow as such and it gets ignored. And this is what contributes to the rare occurrence of the yellow uniflora, in that it never gets pollinated, it never produces seed, and its only way of multiplying is by vegetative means, sending out stolons and shoots and carrying on. But of course the problem is that being almost an albino form, it's weaker, and hence its chances of survival are quite weak. Coming back to the pollination of the Dicer uniflora, as you can see, if you look very closely, we have what is the pollinia, or the pollen sac of the Dicer uniflora hanging from the thorax of the butterfly. Now what happens is that the butterfly comes along and it rests on the flower and is in fact trying to reach the nectar at the bottom of the spur at the back of the flower. And in doing so, its thorax rests on these two sticky points, which are at the end of the pollinia being here in the center of the flower where you see the pale yellow stripes. As it moves away, these sticky parts stick onto the thorax of the butterfly and automatically hangs at the correct angle for pollination, so that when the butterfly goes to the next flower, this pollinia will in fact land onto this sticky part, which is the female part of the flower. This is in fact the seed capsule that develops. Inside are hundreds and hundreds of little seeds. When the capsule bursts open, they drop onto the water of the stream where the dicer is growing, and will be carried away by the stream. However, here at Kirstenbosch, what we do is we take the capsule as it is, and under completely sterile conditions, we will then cut open the seed pod and scatter the seeds onto an agar medium. This agar medium is like a jelly, and it contains all the nutrients that we have put in already beforehand to sustain the little seedlings after they germinate. After about 18 months, you end up with plants this size. These are large enough to work with quite easily, and we will bring them into the nursery, harden them off, and introduce them into normal nursery circumstances. After about 2 years at a real push, but mostly at 3 years, you will end up with a flowering plant. There are various hybrids available, and some of the major nurseries do carry them at certain times of the year. And they have proven that these hybrids are in fact the easiest to grow. And I would suggest, if one is interested in growing dicers, that you should start with a hybrid.
Margaret Sachs wants to know where she can buy Eragrostis and Soteria grass, and she's had difficulty in finding it in the nurseries. Well, these grasses are ideal for their seed, which the birds will feed on, and also the weavers use the Eragrostis leaves and probably the Soteria leaves as well to actually build their nests with. It is difficult to get the seed. It's not available at this stage in small packs, but one can get it from farming co-ops. So you need to go perhaps to the outskirts of the towns and find the local farming co-op and buy it. It's a very well-priced seed. It's not expensive at all, and hopefully into the future they will be produced in small packets for the urban gardener. Roy Muir is a retired gentleman who lives in a flat, and he wonders if there's anything that he can plant in containers on his flat balcony which will attract birds. Well, it's very difficult to attract birds to balconies, and I think rather than actually planting plants where you may have limited success, it would be far better to put in a bird feeder, and perhaps put in a combination feeder that will hold fruit and seed and suet. And you'll find in time that as the birds discover this, they will come right up onto the balcony, and then it may be possible to put in plants that form berries like the dogwood or Rhamnus prenoides and grow it in a small pot on a balcony, and they will feed on the berries as well. But the bird feeder will be the biggest attractor to birds coming to flat balconies.
Before the days of herbicides and pesticides, gardeners had to use natural means to keep their plants insect-free. Aphids were as much a problem then as they are now, and rose lovers found that if they planted a few cloves of garlic in between their rose bushes, they remained aphid-free. Apparently, an infusion of garlic crushed into water and sprayed over the infected plant had a similar effect. The one question I have to ask is, would the beautiful blooms be infused with the delicate scent of garlic? Please join me again next week for another episode of Gardens Wild and Wonderful.
Ask your nurseryman if he's a member of the Green Industries Council. The GIC Green Leaf is your assurance of top quality plants and products, expert advice and friendly service.